Good evening, everyone, and welcome. It looks like a few people are just now logging in. We'll give them a couple of seconds before we start. You see a couple people in the waiting room. I'll let them in as well. It looks like we are at capacity, so let's begin. Good evening, everyone. This is Introduction to Data Loss Prevention. My name is Carl Johnson, and this evening we're going to go into a high-level conversation regarding data loss prevention. If you have your phones, please put it on mute so there's no interruptions. And so let's begin. Again, this is Introduction to Data Loss Prevention. My name is Carl Johnson, and I'm the president of Cleared Systems. We are a information compliance and cybersecurity company in Fairfax, Virginia. I write about the topic of data loss prevention and compliance. Latest book, Shielding Your Business from Data Breaches. So the topic of data loss prevention, I work with clients daily on data loss prevention. So some of the things we discuss here today are literally things that work with customers on quite frequently. For our overview, I first discuss what exactly is data loss prevention, its understanding of it, then go into the importance for businesses. We will then discuss some best practices. And again, this is from being in the field and working with companies on their data loss prevention program. And last but not least, talk about monitoring and maintaining DLP efforts. So, what is, or I should say, understanding data loss prevention? Inside of everyone's organization, throughout the day, you have HR, legal, accounting, all, of course, communicating together, sales, exchanging documents internally and also externally. With data loss prevention, think of it as a extra layer of security, or think of even like a bumpers to make sure that that data that is being exchanged and transmitted throughout the day, internally and externally, make sure it doesn't get into the wrong hands. And also to, in many cases, make sure that there is proper encryption on each of the documents that is being sent around. And that document could either be by email, it could be by just sending an actual Word document, Excel spreadsheet, which we see a lot. It can also mean by maybe there's some source code that has information in it that should not be shared externally. And also this could mean for your physical assets as well. So for instance, if you have laptops and the laptop is at an airport and the person is sending information from that laptop on a non-secure network, then data loss prevention can help out with that as well. In this scenario that we see on the screen here, we have a phishing attack where someone outside the company is basically saying, send me your employee list. And this could be because they spoofed a payroll company or anything like that. So the person is sending Susan over in HR, send me your employee list along with their social security numbers, their date of birth, all their information, please send it over to me. So Susan over in HR says, sure, I'll send it to you. Give me a couple seconds. I'll send it right along the way. She goes ahead and composes the email, and she goes and tries to send the email. Soon as she sends email, and it goes through the corporate email system, DLP then scans that email that Cindy tries to send that had social security numbers, date of birth, all in clear text, all to a domain that is not on a whitelist. Well, DLP comes in and stops that email. So instead of sending that email to that the person down at Phishing Incorporated, instead that email goes into a quarantine. Which is now going to be reviewed by InfoSec or Information Compliance Team to see whether or not that email should be sent in the first place, and also to talk up to Susan about um, why she was sending the email in the first place. So InfoSec team comes into place. They go ahead and fill out an incident report while they're doing their investigations, and now they go and find out that that email should not have been sent. This happens, think about thousands of times a day throughout one organization. And without data loss prevention, it'll be very hard to keep on on hand on what exactly is being exchanged internally and externally. With data loss prevention, basically it's looking for signatures inside of those emails, inside of those documents, whether or not there's PII being sent, whether or not there is certain information that's being sent that we have set up a policy for to keep that information from getting into the wrong hands. So as we know, data breaches, they take place just about every single day, every hour, every minute. Here's a list of just some data breaches and some large data breaches in the last year and a half or so. So that's where, again, where your DLP comes in at. If you look at, and I'll share this slide deck, but if you look at several of the data breaches, the method was accidentally published, right? If the company was using DLP, those accidentally published data breaches would probably not occur or would not occur as often. So having DLP installed and part of your InfoSec program can prevent lots of data breaches. So like I mentioned before, the importance of DLP is that by you having DLP set up and running, you keep from having those accidental data breaches, but also keep information from going outside the organization that should not have been sent in the first place. A great example is regulatory information. If you are a hospital or if you're a healthcare provider, then you deal with HIPAA or PHI. You may also deal with PII. If you are a normal organization, you're likely dealing with username and passwords, where you have users that have username and passwords. Maybe they're storing it inside of SharePoint, storing it inside their OneDrive and clear text. Well, that, especially if those username and passwords are for a global administrator, that could be detrimental to your organization. Think of it as having all those passwords and all that PII and HIPAA information, confidential information. Think of it all just going out the window of your organization. Because you're not protecting it, someone can easily just download that information and walk out the door. Having DLP in place and a good InfoSec team, you can identify that information immediately and either put it into some sort of vault or encrypt it, and of course make sure that the right roles and responsibilities are set up so that not just anyone that goes up to a computer would be able to access it. So DLP is not magic. You need DLP to work with other systems that you have in place. But DLP is great for being proactive in alerting you that there is a possible breach of information or a possible leak of information. The last thing you want as an organization is you want your company to have a data breach where you have to report it. So many organizations like hospitals or healthcare facilities, you have to report that information to OCR, which means that now it's going to be public. If you are a public organizations like T-Mobile with their data breach, well, now you have to assemble your legal team and assemble the media and put out press release discussing your data breach. The hacker itself, they will thank you where your information went, but it's no good for you, right? Just basically now you have a data breach. and now your reputation is on the line. So with DLP, one rule that I practice a lot is using DLP with your sensitivity labels. If you are using or you're in a Microsoft environment or Office 365 environment, then you have something called we call AIP, Azure Information Protection with sensitivity labels. If you're coming from maybe a non-Microsoft, there's products like Titus, which can help you with labeling as well. But what labeling does is it puts an additional layer of protection around those sensitive documents that we talked about before. As a perfect example, if you have a document that is a COI, which means it's information from the federal government that you are supposed to protect, you can label those documents for COI, and now DLP running also in the background, it'll find any of those documents that are not labeled that should be labeled for COI, and it'll alert InfoSec that, hey, you have all these documents inside your organization that are not labeled correctly. The same is true if you have PII. Maybe you have a label that should be for confidential information because it's PII inside those documents. DLP can alert your organization and say, well, I found social security numbers and date of birth in these documents and they're not labeled. You can even go to as far as having DLP have actions, which is when you find those documents, go ahead and label those documents. When you find those documents, label the document and then also put those documents in a secure location. Or in many ways, if you find those documents, go ahead and delete those documents, especially if those documents were not in a secure location. There's many actions that you can set up and many rules that you can use that goes along with sensitivity labels that you use at DLP. I also would say inside your organization, having DLP is not enough. You also need a team, a large team that is going to be active and basically almost on a daily basis go into DLP, look at any of the incidents and mitigate those incidents. As an organization, if you're going into, if we're talking about Microsoft in this case, your compliance center or your purview and looking at DLP on a weekly basis, that's not good enough. You need to constantly be inside of DLP and receiving alerts on a daily basis and acting on those alerts. Whether that means that the alerts are false positives and you are now training DLP to let DLP know that that's a false positive, or if you're mitigating those alerts and providing training to the users that are causing DLP to tag the documents in the first place, either way, it should be a constant part of your program to be part of DLP. You need to have DLP in place, but DLP is not magic, and you need, of course, things such as sensitivity labels to work along with DLP. And like I mentioned, monitoring, it's so important to monitor. There's many companies that can have DLP set up and it's working, but there's not enough monitoring going on and there's not enough mitigation going on. Or what tends to happen, especially if you're an administrator, is you're receiving notifications and alerts all day long. So now you're numb to any of the alerts that DLP is providing. Some of the best practice I would say with DLP is set your alert status to either medium or high once you figure out what your false positives are. That way you know if you're receiving an alert from DLP, you know that it's something that needs to be acted on and it's just not a false positive or a low level alert, such as someone sent a document from one department to another. You want to really train DLP and to make sure that you're only receiving alerts when they're medium to high level. And that concludes our introduction to DLP. As I mentioned, this is a short introduction. If you have any questions whatsoever, please contact us at Cleared Systems. Here we work with DLP and setting up AIP for federal contractors and organizations that have high regulatory compliance requirements. Give us a call or send us an email. We're always here to help. Thank you.